Right, so we should be going live now. And all right, so great. So we are back again on another Friday for our second to last Pay Practitioners panel. So again, my name is Justin Hampton, the founder of CompTool. And I'm really excited because this has been a great season with some other just phenomenal compensation practitioners and consultants that we've been able to connect every other week to talk about all things comp. If this is your first Pay Practitioners panel, it's an unscripted, unprepared conversation where we really like to sit around and talk shop about a variety of topics. So uh, today, the topic is how can the compensation team take advantage of AI? And I am joined by this group that will go ahead and introduce ourselves, starting with Jaime.
Hey everybody, great to be here. My name is Jaime Morfin. I'm managing partner with Sede Consultores, who's the publisher of Sueldos.com, which is a region-wide survey company, compensation survey company. And it's great to have you here again.
Thanks, Jaime. Catherine.
Hi, I'm Catherine Dovey with Sound Compensation. I've been doing compensation consulting for about 20 years, and we do broad-based small and mid-tier companies, primarily closely held family offices, things like that. We can help clients tell their compensation story, and that's what we love to do every day.
Great, Nancy.
Hi, everyone. I'm Nancy Romanishin. I work at Syndio. We are a workplace equity analytics platform, and we help companies pay people fairly and give them equal access to opportunities and career equity. Really excited to be here. I've worked in total rewards for over 30 years now, helping companies manage comp better. So I'm excited to hear about and talk with all of you about how AI can help us all manage comp better.
Hi, I'm Sherry Nornis with Morgan HR, a principal consultant. My major background is as a practitioner in compensation with a variety of different industries and different size companies. We do focus on broad-based compensation, but also offer some other tools of leader education and compensation planning. So I'm excited to be here to talk about AI. It's just a great topic.
Hey, thanks. And Greg.
Yeah, Greg Roche with United Health Group. Been here for almost 5 years and have been practicing comp and benefits for the last 15. And yeah, great topic. Looking forward to this. Have done some panels on this recently, so have some other stuff to share from what some other companies are doing as well.
All right, great. Thank you guys again for joining us. And, as we kind of talk about this, I think in the last 12 months, we've seen just this explosion of AI. I remember a couple of years ago sitting at one of the World at Work forums, and the conversation around AI was, well, nobody's really doing true AI. But boy, how I think that has changed in the last 12 to 18 months. And I think what we've seen a lot of is people getting ready for that. In fact, there was a Mercer survey that went out not too long ago that said, how do we integrate AI into the HR function is one of the top priorities for 82% of CHROs. And so I'll kick it off and open this up to the panel to ask, have you found that your clients are starting to prepare for how we are going to integrate AI in the HR space, specifically in the compensation space? Have you guys been having those conversations?
Yes.
And Greg, I think your position is a little bit different. Yeah. So tell us, as an in-house practitioner, what is that kind of conversation looking like? Where's the lead coming from? Who's involved with that conversation?
Well, I think it's coming from all directions, and I think you called it out perfectly. ChatGPT turned 1 year old on Thursday. Yesterday. It was November 30th of last year when it was released to the broader world. And that's where you're talking about why it's exploded. And so as you said, a couple of years ago, we all went to conferences and talked about it, but you couldn't get your hands on it. Like nobody could touch it. Nobody could see it. ChatGPT changed that. And I know it's not the only large language model in the world, but that's the main one that people use. And once that happened, people all over were like, well, what could we do with this? For me, in my role, I have some specific use cases that we're thinking about, and there's obviously more that you could do with it. But the challenge in an enterprise is, right away, CIOs, CTOs, CISOs were like, we cannot have people in our enterprise putting data into the open source model. But so right away, everybody kind of locked down that access from your corporate computer. Now, there's a good reason for that. But I think, and so for us and many large organizations, we have an enterprise version of ChatGPT. It's basically the same thing, but it's our data. It doesn't leave. And so the first thing is people have to get access to that and start using it. And I'm finding there's not really an overall like, hey, here's all the things we're going to do. It's like, here's the things we're going to experiment with and test out. And as we do that and things start to work, maybe we can deploy it into a tool that the organization can use. But I think a lot of organizations are running into that of how do we do this in a safe way that we can use in our enterprise that's not going to, lead to our data going outside the org. But I read something today, a study, I don't know where it's from, I have to go look it up, that they surveyed people at work and lots of people are using it for work stuff outside of the enterprise environment. So, everybody's just kind of going around it. So I think this is not going to necessarily be like a CHRO top down. This is going to be a lot of people trying things out and see if they can do it. And it's going to kind of bubble up within organizations as opposed to being like a strategic top down type of thing.
Yeah. Interesting. Something I didn't really realize is that we've been using AI in various ways with the rule-based systems, machine learning, and then the deep learning, which is, when you go online and you behave in a certain way, the computer responds to you based on your previous responses. That's all AI, but this ChatGPT, this generative AI level 4 stuff is really a game changer. So I think that's what you were talking about. Greg, we've been on this train for a year now. And as you said, it's going to be growing organically because this is the first time people have really been able to get their hands on it. And we've been playing with it off and on, but we've gotten really interesting results. In one case, I was doing a utilization rate analysis for a client and for a professional services firm. And we use different generative systems, and one of the systems completely inverted the percentages so that the managers were supposed to bill at a higher rate than the employees. Now, we're not using this stuff just directly handing it off to our clients. We just want to see what's happening with it. But there's a lot of crazy data out there that we have to be really careful about. And if everybody's just going to start using it willy-nilly, then we're going to have to be really careful about where that information is coming from and whether or not there are reasonable sources that we can validate.
Yeah, that was one of the things I was thinking about as I was reflecting on preparing for this conversation, right? This idea around, what is it learning? It's what we're feeding it. And how does one control that? And I see that we're going to have, I think there's going to be a lot of, I think, Greg, you hit on it. This, and I love how you said it, Catherine, this organic learning. I think this is, to me, it's sort of variations on a theme in terms of what the release of information, kind of everybody having access to the same information does to behaviors and how that changes then the conversation between, employees who typically had compensation happen to them now being like full scale participants. And I think, Catherine, what you're raising is the danger of, I know I use ChatGPT, for pricing a job. I mean, I wasn't doing it for real, but I just wanted to know what would it deliver for me? And it wasn't bad. So, I mean, I guess, Justin, I'm interested in some of your thinking in terms of, because I feel like you've been, Justin, on sort of the cutting edge of pulling what's out there together and providing that to folks for compensation guidance, and kind of how is this similar to what you've been doing? And then how does this sort of change the game in your eyes?
It's interesting. I was having a conversation with one of our clients the other day, and we were kind of having the conversation of, is what's going to happen to benchmarking? Because really, if we think about what is benchmarking, it is finding two job descriptions that are similar, using your internal one to try and find the one that's the most similar. That is a fantastic use of an AI or a language learning model. And so, my guess is within the next 6 to 12 months, benchmarking won't be done by people again. For those that are leveraging tools, we've done some preliminary testing and have found the results to be fairly promising, especially with smaller data sets. You can plug in, 5 job descriptions from your various surveys, plug in your own job description in ChatGPT 3.5, and it will tell you which one is the most similar to the others. And what's nice is you can even say, great, well, tell me how they're different. Tell me if the survey description has more or less responsibility, and estimate by how much. And what I find that's to be really interesting is, even if you're not leveraging a software or you don't have something that will do that for you automatically, I like to just use the idea as, almost as a proofreader for you, because you can say, leveraging any software, here's the match that I think it is. Here's our job description. Here's the match that we're leveraging. What's the difference between these two? And it will give you a fairly detailed answer depending on what the prompt that you give it is. And that's a big important part is, what does that prompt look like? Are you asking it, where is it different, years experience, and then kind of pushing on it a little bit to say, I don't agree with that. Could you elaborate on this and that? So, I think today people could start leveraging that as just another part of their checklist.
Yeah.
I guess
I would say,
I'm sorry. Go ahead, Greg.
No, go ahead.
No, just thinking about what Justin was saying of using these kind of tools as a comparison tool for a benchmarking tool. My only concern would be that in the ongoing process or the amount of work that companies executives, particularly in the HR department, have, eventually these kind of tools will become kind of God, kind of the main reference of the making decisions if you don't understand how it works. So I'll guess my concept would be not to use it, with a blind eyes and just take it as it is. I would say that in your case, for example, Justin, you will have enough understanding and knowledge of really seeing that this comparison was okay. But there has to be certain criteria on using these kind of tools, not blind eyes, like I said.
Yeah. So to kind of build off both of those last two comments. So Justin, you're talking about comparing the job descriptions. So one of our use cases is when we acquire a new company, and we've done this in the past. So we have several that are not yet in our payroll systems, and we have to go through a process of job mapping. So looking at their jobs, looking at our jobs, mapping them to the job architecture, very basic compensation type of thing to do, right? And I have analysts and consultants on my team that go through this, and we will usually take our first pass based on what we know from the jobs and talking with people, and we'll line it up to our job codes. That's going to be probably from my team's perspective, a 70-80% match, because then we have to go back to the business and talk to them and say, hey, what do you think of this? Did we understand this correctly? And there's lots of comments popping up here on the side about the accuracy of job descriptions, which happens whether it's AI or a person, right? So so we go back, and this sometimes can take weeks or months to set up the meetings, to do all this stuff. It's very time consuming and labor intensive. So one of the things we're trying to do is within our enterprise environment is build a model or add to the model where our job architecture and everything for our UHG is there. And then I can take the information I know from these non-integrated groups and feed it and get 70 or 80% match, which of course is not going to be final, but then my consultants can take it from there and they can go have those conversations, and we're at least speeding it up and taking a little bit of that manual work off of their plate. But to what everybody said, you can't just blindly look at it and go, okay, this is great. And that's not just the AI's fault, right? That's going back to the job descriptions and everything not being accurate. Because I tested this out a little bit by feeding some sample, job descriptions that I know are for our jobs. And then I took one of these non-integrated groups and I said, okay, here's what you call it. I kind of know what it's supposed to match to. And it was returning a higher level position, right? It was upgrading it versus what I would have expected to come out. But again, that's because the job description had all this extra stuff. Does that person really do those things? So it's helpful to get partway there. It's a tool to leverage, but it's not something that's just going to do all the work for you, right? I mean, there's the input. It's only as good as the input, right? And we all already know, and everybody's saying that, like the inputs, that's where the person has to come in and have the conversation, right, and talk about it. But there's still an opportunity to save yourself some time. And the other thing I feel about it is I have multiple consultants working on multiple groups at any one time, and they're just people. They may grade them differently than somebody else on my team, right? And so really what we're doing with AI is just adding another team member. And is it going to be right? No. But is my team always going to be right? No. So it's about being able to get more resources as opposed to adding another person. So that's how we're kind of thinking about using. But all the things people are saying is these challenges are going to exist whether you add more people to your team or whether you employ this AI to kind of take some of the workload.
Right. Yeah. I mean, Greg, you're totally, spot on. AI is only as good as what we give it, right? And I think back to, everything on the internet has to be true, right? But no, you have to have that level base of being able to look at something and say, boy, that just doesn't make sense. And a word of caution, if someone uses it as a catch-all and that's the truth, right? Because it's really an evolutionary process we're going through with AI right now. It's, it seems like it's a revolution, but to be honest, we got to let this evolve and see how it's built up and it's used. And I think, having it as an extra set of hands is awesome, as long as at the end of the day right now we have that does that really make sense button.
I love that idea of kind of bringing critical thinking to it, right? It doesn't replace critical thinking. And Greg, how you're describing it is it's another team member. I really like Deb G has a nice comment here about those sort of a closed model versus an open model. And I think, there's an opportunity to use that closed model, say the enterprise version, as a way of getting to know your own enterprise better.
Right.
And I think there's value to that, because then, to your point, Greg, it's not the answer, but it's certainly a different point of view that then we can consider among, what is it telling us about what it is that we do internally. So I think it's a great comment and something to kind of call through.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it is interesting. So ChatGPT recently released what they're calling GPTs. And essentially what you can do is you can create your own library of information that it's going to pull from. Now, these are publicly available. You can choose how public they are, but they aren't password protected. If someone has a link, then they can access that information. But what's really interesting about some of these things that you can do, for example, is when you have a series of repetitive tasks or questions that are asked kind of frequently over and over and over, but maybe in a slightly different format, that language learning model is still very good at detecting the overall intent of the question and then being able to feed back what the answers might be. So, I think to Greg's point, whenever you are developing something for your own internal employees that is confidential, you would want to leverage a closed system like ChatGPT Enterprise, for example. But what we found is it's actually pretty easy to feed that library with your own data and let it support and give back information very specific to your information. It's funny, we've seen it work in different ways. I know even so, we as a manager of personal information with our CompTool platform, we're always subject to security audits, and those security audits are almost always extensive, but almost always very repetitive, but in a slightly different flavor for each one. So what we've actually found is we can actually start to create tools that will help to answer those security questions based on our existing policies and our procedures and previous questions that we've done. And it's only going to be based upon our data. So, it's a slightly different situation as us being a software provider versus kind of a compensation team. But the idea is still there that for those questions that come in from folks, like if you're trying to explain your comp philosophy, or if you have employees that are trying to find a particular job or skill set within a company, if you've got all of your job description library loaded, or your career hierarchies or things like that, or your HR manuals, for example, it can start to address and answer questions that are oftentimes done by an HR business partner or compensation person.
Yeah. And I think that's a good off the shelf sort of, obviously you're not going to use the public version for this, but again, you could very quickly create all your documentation for, and this works in comp, but it also works really well in benefits, because some of us have probably done some benefits, and there's just like pages and pages and pages of documentations, and there's FAQs and there's stuff, and nobody really wants to go through that. Your employees don't want to filter through that, and your intranet search capability is usually terrible. Like your intranet search capability usually doesn't find it. So having it all loaded in and then having people type the question, you're going to have a much better experience there. And that's pretty straightforward.
Right.
Because it just comes back. I mean, I have this is separate from work, my own stuff that I do on the side with my networking for introverts stuff. I have my book and every newsletter and everything I've ever written loaded into effectively a chat bot that's only trained on my material, and people can ask it questions and it's only going to answer it like I answer it. And so most people don't go to that because they're like, whatever, I'm not going to ask those questions. But here's how I use that. People email me basically the same types of questions, and I just take the question from the email and I pop it in the chat, and then it gives me a pre-written response that's exactly like I would have written it, because it's my words. It's only trained on my words. So then I just take that and I answer the email. It just like makes my response like super quick doing that. So, I mean, that's a good use, like that doesn't take a lot to put into place.
It's a Greg bot. I like that.
Yeah.
But that's true, right? And I think you've identified some excellent uses. I mean, I think one of the things too, some of you may know, I have a son with autism. And one of the things I've learned from, that experience is actually that people learn differently. People take information in differently. And so I think this becomes another opportunity I like what you're saying, Greg, like enhance the employee experience. Create this sort of an automated internal HR consultant for your business, and augment sort of what that experience is. It will never replace, human beings. Well, at least not right now. There are some futurists who are a little gloom and doomy. Maybe eventually it will, So I love the Terminator series. Anyway, but I think you do have this opportunity to improve and enhance how employees are experiencing employment with you in a way that is still human. It provides that human touch. And I like how you're saying, Greg, like it's using your words. So, you can have some really sophisticated, communications teams that can do sort of the same thing and make sure that however you're augmenting the responses to questions and that relationship with employees sounds like your organization and kind of is embedded with, that type of language. So I think there's great opportunity, really.
Right. Well, and to comp, right? I mean, sorry, one thing to comp's point of view, think about how many times we're like, how do you help managers have a conversation about compensation? How do you have them explain this stuff? I mean, if there's a place where they're like, I'm like, somebody asked me for a promotion and they didn't get it, like, how should I respond? And you have your sort of talking points that can kind of come out and help the managers along, right? So you don't necessarily have to have all your comp consultants do that all the time, and that's not only, and even your comp consultants could use it if they get a question. Like I use it because it provides consistency. It's like it's at least a consistent answer and stuff that you could use. So again, it's not coming up with what should I pay this person yet, right? I think that could be coming, but it's how do you communicate about comp? How do you get a consistent message for all your managers and all your team, putting it out there?
Yeah.
And to Laura, sorry, one thing, and then I'll stop talking. Laura Morgan just put a comment up there that says managers will say AI told me to do that. Well, back to this thing of, is it just another team member? I mean, yes, they can use that excuse, but it would be the same as if the comp consultant told them, right? And so I was on a panel a couple of weeks ago, and we were talking about we're presenting this to a bunch of CHROs and total rewards leaders. And one person said, we've been using this to help us with our some of their leave authorizations, like leave of absence documentation. And they said it gave somebody some wrong information. The entity they were using gave some wrong information, and they had to decide, are we going to abide by what it told them? Are we going to stick with it and correct the mistake? And they said, yes, we have to. And my response is, you would do the same thing with an employee. If you had an employee that gave the wrong information, you would be like, okay, we have to stick with it and we have to go with it. Yes, you want to retrain the model or retrain the employee, but you gotta live with it. And so it's not just like, oh, it's an excuse because the machine said it. It's like you have to, again, think of it as another member of your team.
Yeah, that's a great point, Greg. And I was going to mention that, if you're going to create those scripts, or you're going to have ChatGPT have those scripts built, there's some AI tools now like Pictory that allows you to take that script and turn it into a video content. And then there's another tool that I thought you guys, I don't know if everybody else knows about this, but I just learned about it recently. It's called There's an AI for That. And if you go in there, you can find these tools that will allow you to build like the videos and stuff. So to your point, you can take that, Greg, and even, build it out. So I expect some organizations will be doing that soon if you haven't already, or they haven't already.
And I think Stacy Fenner makes a good point too. I agree in the comments here about values and culture and live experiential training. I think, I think there's, again, to me, it's more of an augmentation tool. But I'm also interested, and I don't know how much you all have thought about this. Well, of what else it can tell us. I think picking on something you had said, Greg, earlier, I'm really interested in looking at how it is using its own, it's not really critical thinking, but like what are the patterns and things that it's able to discover, right? As we feed it information, feed it data, and sort of the answers it's coming up with, and how that foots with what we would have done as human beings. Like that's what I'm really interested in, because they're obviously, and especially obviously working for a software company, software is just capable of synthesizing so much information at once so quickly. And so I'm really interested in more of that, and the implications for compensation management, truly, because I see us as having, we have put up and worked with frameworks, right, that have worked for us for a long time, but they worked for us because we didn't have software. And now we're entering this place of having just so many more tools at our disposal and so much more data at our disposal that I think it's going to change the way we manage comp going forward. And I'm really interested. I mean, we're already doing a lot of that, obviously, at Syndio. We do a lot of that as we try to bring together sort of these different pieces of information that normally you don't have at your fingertips to make pay decisions. I'm just curious about how others are thinking about that when we think about AI. Sorry, I didn't mean to stump the group.
I guess what we're seeing at this moment is probably only the tip of the iceberg, because these are the generally available tools. For example, ChatGPT, we all know it because it's available, because it's right there. Just log in and it's it's right there. But to answer your question, I see it's gonna take a little bit of time to see those specially developed tools for certain areas, including HR, including compensations, and it's just a matter of just letting your imagination to go everywhere to see what you can create. But at this moment, I don't know. Aside from the things that we commented at this time, I haven't seen anything more than that. It's using AI as a comparative tool, as a way of informing employees on their policies, things like that. That's to the extent that I have seen so far, but that's my experience. Probably the other guys will have another experience.
I think there's going to be a lot of different kinds of governance that's going to come into play as we begin to explore what can ChatGPT do, because I think it's interesting. There's such a push for pay transparency, but there's also such a push for privacy. And those two things really do come to a head, especially when we start to look at the workforce. So, one of the things that the AIs are really good at doing is just looking at just garbage piles of data. And I mean that in a way that it can be disorganized, it can be messy, but they can find things from that. So just imagine an organization where you are evaluating performance reviews or employee engagement based on a company's Slack channels and what people have said. Can you then determine which employees are bigger flight risks? And should you do that? Is the AI going to be appropriate? Kara Snyder over at Textio, I think every other day I see a post from her about the biases that are found within using AI tools to write those job descriptions. So I think we're going to start to see a lot of interesting use cases as we push those boundaries. But I think we'll probably see some overstepping because the laws are slower to catch up than the technology. But then we're going to see some other things coming into play where companies really need to be considerate and thoughtful with how are they using that, and does it align with the values of their employees, and does it really, serve the stakeholders? And so
Yeah.
I'm really interested to see how that happens. And I wonder, Nancy, I mean, I don't know how much you can share, but I'm sure with some of the work that Syndio is doing, trying to determine pay, it's already I don't want to say what it is. I mean, I don't want to misspeak, but I'll be really interested to see kind of how information is used to help determine rates of pay. And
Right. Yeah. I mean, we already see it in terms of, when I think about our Pay Finder tool, and that's what my goofy post on LinkedIn where I'm comparing it to Jarvis. But I mean, it's bringing together internal pay equity along with external competitive data and helping you consider new ranges, different ranges, say for jobs, and what's truly the equitable pay range. So there's that coming together of design and practice. And that's what I think I can see AI really helping us build on, is this idea of, yes, this is what you designed, but this is actually what you're doing in practice. And then I think that's where, we as comp professionals have to say which one is the right one. And it's something in the middle, probably, right? What can we learn from what we're doing in practice versus what it was the intention of our design? And how can we take that into consideration to better hone it so that we're really driving the business results that we're looking to drive with our rewards programs? And I think those are the things that I see us being able to build on. But I also know I don't know what I don't know. And that's where I'm really, right, like Justin, like you're talking about, what are these other data sources, right, that we don't necessarily consider? And then how do we deal with that in the face of like the federal government just came out with this like sweeping thing on AI. That's all I can call it because it's so broad and it touched like every possible aspect and it seemed like this big deal. And then when you read it, you're like, what is this telling me? So hopefully, I mean, you know, the government's going to be involved, right, Sherry? Like the government's going to be involved in AI. Not going to tell you exactly how, but we're going to do it.
Right. So we take that document, throw it into AI, and ask them, what does this mean? Right. So, I mean, that's what I think about is with everything, especially when it involves employees, there's going to be regulation that eventually we're going to have to figure out how to deal with. Right. So it's an interesting time to deal with this evolutionary product of AI, because I got to tell you, having been in this business a long time, I could have used it 30 years ago to craft some stuff. So it's kind of like a kid in the candy store. But again, that common sense, does it really make sense? I just don't want to undermine that we really need to make sure that we have our own internal governance when we're looking at this so it makes sense. So,
yeah.
You
know, and this is kind of go back. I mean, there's some conversations in the chat about how we're going to go and AI interpreting conversations and things like that. Another thought is not necessarily directly related, but in the performance management space, I mean, if your AI was reading every manager's performance review to identify which managers are good at feedback and which ones aren't, so you could be like, hey man, your performance review is kind of like trash. you manager probably could use some help on this because you're not giving constructive feedback. You're not, but you could do that really pretty quickly. I mean, that's pretty straightforward, and to find managers who aren't doing that. So instead of like, you know, looking at the employee engagement survey and saying, hey, you're not you know, here's how you were rated as a manager by your employees. I mean, that's just another source of like, here's where you could do better. But yeah, I mean, I've taken like my own teams. I'll say like, give me all your accomplishments like for the year, and you pile them all in there and be like, hey, summarize what my team did. And it like breaks it out into different sub things, and like the realization is like that's effectively like rewriting the job description, right? Like the real job description. Like this is what my team actually is. If you did that with everybody in the org, now everybody's going to inflate their accomplishments because they all do anyway, right? I mean, everybody inflates how much they do and stuff like that. But you could adjust for that. You could add employees to basically say, what do you do all day, right? And have like back to job descriptions, like what is the real thing? We say they do these things, but how much do they really do compared to what we say? So can you recalibrate your job descriptions? But some other thoughts and ideas on what you could be with it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry, I wanted to bring it the incorporation of AI in society and have it probably discussion regarding that as probably a salary market disruptor. I mean, if we see that these tools is going to affect job positions specifically, probably disappear some of those, particularly those that have a repetitive task. Eventually, if that happens, it's going to have an impact in the salary market. And that's another thing that we need to discuss as compositions, consultants. And that on one side. And the other side, of course, something that we're already seeing is that everything that is related to AI as a position just going up like crazy, like foam going up in terms of price market.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, how do you see that? I mean, are you seeing changes really in the organization by bringing at this very moment AI on your structures and in tasks that was normally doing human beings?
I mean, I think we've seen that for some time, though. I think AI is sort of an extension of a trend we've seen with automation. I think about when I was at Willis Towers Watson, we had a software that would break jobs out in terms of the skill sets, sort of chunk out skill sets. You would feed it the job description, and then it basically would start to parse out what can be automated and what requires the human being. And it was helping organizations reorganize certain parts of their, usually, Jaime, just you write a pocket of the organization where here are folks engaged in, like you're saying, here are some relatively repetitive tasks, and now we can, maybe there's a better way to organize the work for them. So I see it as, I think it's like any sort of revolution that we've seen in technology where you're seeing these decisions be made by organizations. And then to your point, then we often see following on, wow, there's a scarcity of this skill set. And so now we're just going to throw a bunch of money at it, right? And so I often think about it as, I think about like Y2K and like how, back in the day that was a thing, right? Like my contemporaries are remembering that. So yeah, and it was like, oh my God, everything's going to, and then it passed and nothing happened. So I think it's that kind of a thing where, I think the challenge, Jaime, is how rapidly it's happening. I think that's one of the things that I really think about. We used to do things like, does everybody remember when technology, how you have like the shadow structure? You'd have your structure, and then we started to have tech jobs that were just so highly paid. And so we called it the shadow structure. It's like the stealth structure. Don't tell everybody that we're paying these people so much money because we have to. Mm-hmm. The complication is like, there's just so much of that and it's happening so quickly. So I think we all have to think about how do we engineer compensation to manage that? It was sort of an exception. I don't know how much of an exception it's going to be. So what does that look like? Do I have sort of a fixed salary and do I attach something to it for a scarce skill set? And then, but with this idea that it's not going to be this sort of given, so I can sort of transition out of that over the next few years when the skill set normalizes and everybody's, a data scientist, which is pretty much happening right now.
Yeah.
Right? Like,
so I think. So I think something's a little bit different with this technology, right? And is the accessibility, right? Meaning, if you came out with a new technology, like way back in the day, Y2K thing you were talking about, I started my career as an SAP configuration analyst. Okay, so I had to learn for the Y2K thing, and I got a special premium pay for that because at the time it was a hot skill, and then when it wasn't a hot skill, they were like, we're taking that away, and everyone's mad, and they're like, hey, I was living off of that. This is also now I don't have to get trained. I don't have to get special training necessarily on that technology. And so one of the things I think for CHROs and people in HR and comp and stuff is if you're at a company, and I say if, because I know not a company has this, right? But if you're at a large company, you don't need a separate comp tool to use GPT or the large language model. It's the same one your company is using. So for example, in comp, I'm not solving billion-dollar problems with AI, but my technology team is for healthcare. They're trying to come up with ways to solve billion-dollar healthcare problems, but use the same environment and model they're using. I don't have to go buy a separate software. So for those of you in the tech space, the HR tech or the space, there's implications there because I don't have to go out and buy something just for comp. And so if you're on and you're listening and you do have to go to your CIO, to your CTO and say like, hey, we want to get in the environment too, right? And you're going to all be paying a model, you might as well get in there. So I think this is where it's a little bit different in terms of those skill sets of people can get in and start using it. The organization will let them, and they can start to see some of these benefits. So that's where I think it's a little different. And yes, obviously you need people who are experts in this and people who are data scientists and all those things. It's like you still need that. I'm not saying we're all data scientists, but it doesn't take a lot for me to just get access and go play around and start testing. And then once the proof of concept, I engage my technology team and they go, okay, let's turn this into an actual product that you can use for your team.
It's really interesting. Sure. Yeah, I think the thing that I think you've all touched on, Jaime and Nancy, for sure, is how quickly things change, how quickly the transition is coming. And I just have a quick story. When I took a sabbatical a few years back, and when we left, there was no World Wide Web. And when we came back, people kept talking about the World Wide Web and how they'd sent email to so-and-so, but you can't send email to them because they're at a different company. How did you do that? And so I felt like Rip Van Winkle in less than 2 years. And I can't imagine what people are going to feel like, you know, a year or two from now, if they're not staying on top of this. I think it's really important for folks to stay on top of it and stay aware of the changes, because it's nuts. It's so fast.
No, you're so right. And I think, yeah, and Greg, like you're talking about, I think, and Catherine, it's that democratization of information. Like I keep coming back to the Gutenberg printing press, and just how, you know, you think about, I wasn't there, but I mean, when you think about like just how it revolutionizes, right? Like with access to information. And so Greg, like what you're talking about, it's that kind of sparked a thought. It's access to technology, right? It's access to more than just information. It's access to a new way of doing things that is really exciting. I mean, I don't know about all of you, but I mean, and especially when I joined Syndio, one of the things that became very clear to me was just how like ignorant of, you know, HR tech stack I was, quite honestly, in terms of tech, you know, and the ways that technology should and could be used in HR. I feel like as compensation professionals, we love Excel. Yes, it is wonderful, but I think we also overly rely on it. We have for quite some time. So there's an opportunity to kind of embrace other technologies, you know, in addition to our cherished spreadsheets, and think differently about how we can do these things. And so I do see that. And I think, Greg, that was really helpful the way you frame that. I think it is that democratization of technology itself that's going to really change things.
Yeah, but going back to this discussion of bringing in technology into our kind of role positions, particularly in compensation environment, even Excel, bringing Excel into our way of doing things really speed things up. But really, it was a learning curve that eventually we're going to see with incorporation of these kind of technologies. ChatGPT is only a fraction of it, and it's very easy to use because it's language-based. I mean, you're writing basically the way you speak. But we're probably going to start seeing some other really powerful technologies that will need to elevate our technology, savvy and skills, tools that we're not seeing at this moment. And it's going to happen very quickly. 2 years, we're going to, if we can just replicate this conversation a couple of years, we're probably going to have a discussion, discussing everything totally different, no? And that's the scary part of it.
Can I tell you one thing I think is going to happen in the next year, though? I think we're at the top of the hype cycle with generative AI in terms of the Gartner hype cycle. I think we're probably about the peak of inflated expectations, and we're about to start to slide down to the trough of disillusionment. And what I mean by that is we're all talking about all the promise, and we're going to, and everybody on here is like, oh my God, this is going to be amazing. It's going to be great. And it will be. But you've got the regulation. You've got people sharing stories about bad results. And you're going to have people who are going to, it's hype. Like we've heard this hype. We've heard for years. And again, 5 years ago, we were talking about, and I know because I was giving the presentation at World at Work, the future of work. And I did 45 minutes on AI in HR. My ideas, like my concepts about what it could do. And it's like, well, this is great. How do I do it? And I was like, I don't know. These are just ideas. And so again, it was hype at the time. It was like, oh, okay, whatever. Well, 5 years later, here we are, and we're like, it's going to do all these things, and it's farther along. It is doing more, but people are going to be disappointed because they're thinking it's going to revolutionize everything. Sherry, you said it's an evolution, right? It's going to be more. It's not going to do everything we wanted, and we're going to have people that go, oh, it's hype. But if you keep learning and using it and keep working on it, you'll be one of those early adopters back up the other side and becomes a technology that's just a part of what we. So I think we all have to be careful not to like just let ourselves get disillusioned when it doesn't do everything we want it to, and keep going and keep learning and keep trying to figure out new uses for it. So I think there's a good shot that could be the case in the next couple of years of the AI. So we'll see. I mean, maybe not, but that's my opinion. I could be wrong. That's what I think.
Where's my flying car?
Yeah,
That's right.
I'm ready.
They exist. They do exist.
Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We were talking about Excel a little bit. One of the things I'm excited for as a comp person is just the integrations with the existing technologies that we do have. I love working with Excel, but there's some limitations behind it. But one of the things that, if you don't know you could do this, I've gone into chat and said, hey, I've got a workbook with 12 tabs. I need 12 workbooks. And you can say, write me a VBA script for exactly that. We'll write that for you. You can plug it in. And sometimes it works on a Mac for me. Sometimes it doesn't work. So I say, hey, I'm on a Mac. So, oh, my apologies. Here's the updated code. Hey, I got this error message. What does that mean? Oh, here's the explanation of the message. Let me fix that for you. And then it will come back. I mean, what I have found is I think that there was a professor out of England. I don't recall who it was, but he said, people won't be replaced by AI, but people will be replaced by people that use AI. And I think, if we think of AI as a tool for how we kind of can enhance our own productivity and what we can deliver, I think that's really where we're going to see that tremendous uplift in productivity. We've got I love, Greg, how you were saying that, treat it like someone on your team, because it kind of is. When we talk through the job description manager that we have in CompTool, we actually suggest to consider it like an intern. It's not going to be perfect. It might not get you exactly what you need, but it will be consistent. It will kind of follow your instructions, but you're probably going to have to go and make some refinements and tweaks to get it to be exactly what you want it to be like. And I think I was surprised to see it not change like that.
Yeah, and I would say it can work any time of the day. It doesn't ask for PTO. It doesn't ask for a name. It will never unionize. It is like, and every time you ask it to correct itself, it never gives you attitude. It just does what you ask it to do happily. Right? So I'm very polite to ChatGPT. I always say thank you, and that's great, and give it good feedback so that when the machines actually do take over, maybe they'll remember me as a nice person and they won't just like eliminate me right away.
Right. You're a good human.
Terminator.
Yeah.
I like that.
Oh, that was fun.
No comment.
And like somehow we have John Connor in the chat in the
I know.
name, right? For talking about the Terminator and AI.
Yeah, seriously, right? When the machines, that was there is a futurist, I forget which, who said basically the machines will take over and we'll just be we'll be fine with it until the day the machines decide, you know what, these trees, we don't need them. Let's just wipe them out. And then we'll all die and the trees just won't realize it. But it's all, but we're going to be, according to Justin, we're going to be a hell of a lot more productive before that happens. So it's all good.
Maybe at farming. At some point we'll be reduced to farming. And but I know we're running out in time. I wish I would have brought it up earlier, but I do think, and I think Jaime, you kind of brought this up a little bit too, but I think it'll be interesting to see the shift towards those roles that require a set of hands, the skilled, those will, how those will continue to move up in importance. And maybe the software engineer pay is going to come down, but your HVAC technician role is going to come up.
Yes. Actually, the Webster, I think, didn't we find out that Webster's like word of the year was authentic?
Yes.
Right? That was, and I do think, Justin, you're hitting on something. And like you're saying, Jaime, like there is something about people seeking sort of human experiences, creative experiences, things that can't be manufactured or engineered, right? So maybe there will be sort of that balance of things. But I do see a lot of promise. And I think, Justin, it's to your point in terms of just helping us all be more productive, focus on things that matter and where we need to infuse humanity, right, and critical thinking, and then be able to sort of automate those other things. I mean, once upon a time, we didn't have washing machines, and you had to spend, and still there are parts of the world where people spend inordinate amounts of time washing clothes. But boy, you get a washing machine and wow, now I have a lot of free time. So I think my hope is that, this is sort of more of the same where we're able to, I know Justin's giving me a look like, where's she going with this? But I hopefully this is more of the same where we're able to augment what we're doing and then even raise things that we wouldn't have seen with our human eyes, that it's able to, because of its ability to synthesize all that information so quickly. It just makes us better at what we do.
And one of the ways I found it to make me better that I really was surprised is, email is not always a great means for communication, especially if it's a contentious subject. But boy, I swear that you can take an email that may be too curt or too passionate, plug it into ChatGPT and say, hey, make this a little bit nicer. And it will do it. So I will admit it. I have done it a couple of times to, try to diffuse a situation that's, maybe gotten a little more emotional. So I mean, there's lots of great ways we can use as professionals, and especially comp teams.
It's going to help engineers to be more human, to be more communicative and more nice.
Great.
Such good stuff.
Well, great. Well, that takes us up to about the top of the hour. Any final thoughts?
I like
Very
Greg's
quickly,
idea of coming back in 2 years and seeing what this conversation looks like or whatever. I just think that would be fascinating.
Yeah.
Totally. But at the same time, you continue to see in those, HR directors and personnel, when they ask what are the most needed skills, you can still see human skills on the top of them, communications, and involvement, leadership, etc. So humans, we still have a way to survive as soon as we keep those.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And just me on those skills, right? And I feel like with the social media and all the ways we communicate online, we've gotten so bad at those commute skills. So it's really, people need to focus on building more of those to stand out in the future, I think.
Yeah, that emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, right.
Great. Well, thanks again so much for the really compelling conversation today. We've got one more PIC practitioners panel this season. It is December 15th, and I'm excited for that topic. We're going to talk about, I can't remember the exact title for it, but it's something along the lines of, does merit still make sense? So, I think that'll be a really fun conversation with this group, and hopefully one that's a little, get you thinking. So we'll see you in about 2 weeks on December 15th at 9:00 Pacific or 12:00 Eastern time. And we'll look forward to the conversation coming up. Thanks again, everybody. Really appreciate the time today.
Yep.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.